Hi everyone. So today I really want to talk about career progression and specifically upskilling and moving up in your careers to mid-level, senior and beyond. And I want to start first by asking you a question that Sasha kind of asked this morning. I want you to picture someone in your industry that you respect, someone that you think is awesome, someone maybe that they have like really high quality skills, like what their characteristics might be, something that you look up to. And like, why is it that you respect that person? So I thought it was really funny that this morning that Joe mentioned like social media celebrities, because I'm a sucker for all of those people. I always think of someone called Ire Aderinokun. I don't know if anybody here has heard of her. A few people. So she's based in Lagos, Nigeria. There's a booming tech scene out there. So she's a front-end developer. She's also a designer. She's a Google expert in web technologies. As a writer, she has a blog called Bits of Code. And if you can think of a front-end topic, she has already written about it. Like, she's amazing. She's an international speaker. She talks about things like progressive enhancement, accessibility, web components. And I don't know if you've heard of the term career crush. I really like what she does, and I really want to be able to do it all too one day. But the point that I'm making is that developers like Ire and the people that you're all thinking of, they weren't born with those skills overnight. They've been developed over a period of time. Maybe they built some new features, maybe they did some mentoring and got promoted at different areas in their careers. But they all started out as juniors. Some of them are self-taught. Some of them went through some sort of formal learning. Some of them have learned on the job. They all went through stuff, right? So juniors are really, really important. And we want to make sure that today's junior developers and designers are all progressing through their careers. So they too will be the amazing people that people like us in this room are inspired by. Especially because there just aren't enough people in the STEM industry. There was a study recently that came out that for every 13 jobs available in a STEM subject, being science, technology, engineering and maths, there was only one person qualified to do that job. And this has a knock-on effect. It means that companies are unable to progress at the rate they want, and also technological innovations are going to be happening at a slower rate, because we just don't have enough people with the know-how. But if we imagine a world where we do a good job of training up the junior developers that we have, and they go on to train up other juniors, and those juniors train other juniors, we just go on this like great cycle. That's the dream, but it's hard to do. So I want to talk about how we can do that. Before I get into it, as mentioned, I'm a software engineer right now at a company called FutureLearn. I've been at FutureLearn a little over a year and a half. I love working there. I do a lot of front-end development work. FutureLearn, if you don't know about it, is a social learning company. So you can access online courses from lots of different universities and institutions from across the world. So anything from business and management to teaching to health or technology. And then before I started at FutureLearn, I was working at Marks & Spencer. And there I started on a 12-month software engineering graduate scheme. So for me, that's where all of the junior part of my career happened, and I learned so much on that process. So when I talk about junior in this talk, you could have lots of different titles, but I'm aiming this at anybody that's early on in their careers. But I also want to target the people that work with you. The tech leads, the mentors, and the managers. They can be instrumental in your development. And a lot of what I want to share with you today came out of confusion for me, because I was confused by what my career progress was supposed to look like. How I was officially supposed to move from being a junior developer to a mid-level developer, I had no clue. And I didn't know how long I was actually supposed to be a junior developer for. Like, nobody had the answers to these questions. But I think we can get on that career progression by looking at it from these two angles. There are things that you as juniors today can be doing to move on to the next stage in your careers, but there are also the things that the supporters who work with you can be doing to help you progress. So starting with juniors. And first, start thinking about ways that you can stretch yourself. So this is something that I actually always groan at when somebody tells me to do, because it's like, oh, stretch yourself, push yourself. It's like, well, you're just telling me I have to do something that I'm going to find really uncomfortable. I don't really want to do that. But it's like a necessary evil. For me, ironically, this was public speaking and communication, because I'm generally quite an awkward person. But the idea of putting yourself out there for lots of different things makes that whole process a little bit easier. And so it might be something else for you. One of the graduate developers that I used to work with, for them, it was all about teaching. When they started to be able to teach other people in their teams things, they felt that they were moving on from the whole junior developer mindset. So teaching in itself is quite a crucial skill that you expect from senior engineers or senior designers. But it's something that you can start doing today. So Joe mentioned this morning, there are places like CodeBar or Black Girl Tech, because so many organizations out there that are looking for coaches to come and teach complete beginners to technology, people that haven't even seen a line of code before. And it is a great experience. I once did it and somebody asked me, like, what is programming? I was like, that's such a good question. I don't even know how to answer it. But you learn so much from teaching other people. And when you think about ways that you can stretch yourself, if you think about it in this model, in the middle you have your comfort zone, right? These are for your everyday activities. You don't really learn that much in this area. I mean, it's called your comfort zone for a reason, because you feel comfortable here. But what you actually want to do is come out into this stretch zone. So all the tasks that fit into this area are really challenging. Maybe it's something that you've never done before, or you take something that you do in the same way over and over again and switch it up and do it in a different way. That's a way to stretch yourself. And this is like the prime space for learning new things. But you can go too far, and where you don't want to end up is in your panic zone. This is literally just stress. You're not going to learn anything. You're not going to learn anything here, and it's not going to benefit you in any way. So you can tell this by just imagining yourself doing that activity. So for example, if you think of yourself coming up on stage and doing some talk, some public speaking, if you want to throw up just at the thought of that, that's probably in your stretch zone. Maybe you don't do that today, but think about it for the future. Because just because something is in your panic zone today, doesn't mean it can't move into your stretch zone tomorrow. It's fluid and things are always changing as you are developing and progressing. I think it's also worth thinking about ways that you can make a change in your wider areas. So thinking slightly outside of your role and looking to make a bigger impact. One of the things on the grad scheme that myself and the other grads wanted to do is look at rotations. So on the 12-month scheme that we were on, we were in the same role for that whole period. And we thought, as we just started our careers, it'd be a really good opportunity to learn from different areas of the business. So whether that's front-end development, back-end development, the APIs team, the mobile development team, that would be a really good opportunity for us to learn different skills. So we got together, we talked to engineering managers and the directors in the company to make this happen for the following cohort. And it's just that we had an idea, we thought it could be better, and we made that change happen. And it's these kind of like extracurricular type activities that look really good when you go for a promotion chat or an interview to talk about some of the stuff that you're doing outside of the main role. And when you see a chance to improve some of these types of things, like fix it if you can. In fact, fix all the things, because you're making life better for everyone. And it's a great development opportunity for you. One of the things I really struggled with, because I was really reluctant to share my opinions as a junior developer. I can probably still improve in this area, actually. I felt like I didn't know enough to contribute to a lot of the discussions that were happening. Sometimes they just went straight over my head. But I think it's really important to recognise that all of your thoughts give really good insight to the teams that you work with. Because it's really interesting to see how a new person sees the kind of things that you've been working on, that teams have been working on. And it's really important that you're working in an environment that lets you feel safe enough to do this. A tweet that I saw a little while ago now by Carolyn, who might be here, is that juniors have a perspective that deserves to be heard. And this is so true, because I felt at the time that being a junior felt like being a burden. But it's not. It's a very challenging experience. But your energy, your curiosity, and your fresh perspective are invaluable to your teams. So share your thoughts, because it's useful for your development and for the teams that you work in. But do remember that it's actually okay to not know. Like, you are just starting out, you're still learning a lot, and you can't know everything on day one. You can't know everything ever. So ask lots of questions, learn lots. And I find a top tip that worked for me was to just state the obvious and reiterate the assumptions that people are making in the room. Because you'll find that we don't all think in the same way, and just because it's obvious to you doesn't mean that it's obvious to the rest of the people you're communicating with. And it's just a really useful way to make sure that everybody in the room is on the same page, while also contributing to the discussions that are happening. And then you can go away and pick up on those kind of extra informations that you're not sure about later. And then one last thing that I want to pick up on for junior developers is the importance of celebrating your achievements. You're going to be making amazing progress at a super fast rate. It can be hard to stop and just appreciate that you've done something really cool. And it doesn't have to be consumed by all the other things that you're planning to do too. Has anyone heard of Lara Hogan? A couple people. So she's another social media celeb that I follow. She's really cool. She's another international speaker and author. And she has this page on her website called Donuts. And it's a way for her to celebrate her career goals. So every time something cool happens in her career, she got like a book deal or a promotion, she goes out, buys a donut, takes a picture and puts it on her website. Because it's so important to celebrate the progress that you're making. And each donut here is just like a little mini celebration. What I like about this is it's also a great confidence boost when you look back at the different pictures and see all the different ways that you've been progressing. And I find that it's also good documentation, which brings me on to my next point of collecting evidence, because that documentation becomes your evidence of your personal growth. After you've been stretching yourself and like making changes a little bit outside of your role, you don't want to forget all of that stuff. Like, it's all really important. So just write them down. And this is something that I really wish that I'd been better at. I ended up doing it retrospectively at one point when I wanted to apply for a new role. But when you look back at all of your different achievements, it's great for things like competency interviews, when they ask you to tell me about a time when you've worked in a team, for example. And you've got a list of all of these things that you've already done. You've got a list of examples when you've already shown this. And if you're not sure what kind of evidence you can be collecting, think about the combination of soft and hard skills. So you've probably all come across the term of soft skills already today. So soft skills are general attributes that aren't specific to a job or an industry. So these things in soft skills might include leadership or empathy. Communication is always a really important one. They're generally quite hard to learn without just doing it and learning from your mistakes. Whereas the difference with hard skills is that they can usually be taught in a series of concrete steps. So you might find that teaching someone how to code is a simpler process than trying to teach someone how to listen and communicate effectively in a meeting. But those hard skills are too important to develop depending on the role that you're doing, because you want to be able to perfect your craft. So whether you're a designer or a developer, you have very specific hard skills. And with the right resources, you can improve them and work on them. Because I don't know about you, but when I was learning how to code, my only question would be, does this code work? Cool, I'm happy. I'm not going to look at it again. It's fine. But eventually you're going to get better, and you're going to look back and improve and see on ways that you can improve the things that you did as a junior developer. So think about how you can do this specifically for your hard skills. This will be one of the first things that some of the companies that you work at will look at. And think about how you're applying the new things that you learn to the job that you're doing. How are these skills building up your knowledge base? And someone taught me about your T-shape not too long ago. And I think thinking about this concept of your T-shape is useful for deciding what kind of things to learn. As a front-end developer, I was really focused on learning JavaScript, and I didn't leave that scope of just learning JavaScript. But if you think about having this shape, you have a foundation of base skills or base knowledge, and then you build depth in one or two areas that you're interested in. So things in here could be anything from writing to drawing to coding to making music, and that could all sit in your base knowledge. And then thinking of areas that are of interest to you or relevant to your work, then think of areas that you want to excel or be amazing at. And that is where you start building depth. So once you've decided this, that's how you can split your time, like your development time. So if I relate this to my experience, in my base and knowledge, I have learned a little bit of Ruby on Rails. I've looked a little bit at APIs. I did a little bit of Android development, all because they sounded interesting, so I did learn a little bit in those areas. But the place where I'm building my depth is in JavaScript and front-end tools. So that's where I spend the most of my learning time. So if I have 2 hours a week to develop, I'll spend 1 hour learning something more advanced in JavaScript and 1 hour just picking random bits of tech that I've heard about today. And what I found is that having that base knowledge in different areas of technology and just different areas generally has made me a better front-end developer. Because while you're not focused solely on JavaScript, you have a better understanding of how to work with different kinds of teams and people around you. And it also makes you more attractive to the employers that you work with. And who knows, maybe while building your knowledge base in some completely random area of tech, you find something that you enjoy a little bit more and maybe want to change your focus to that new thing. And if you don't have a career framework where you work, some general things that you might want to document could be specific hard skills, like I've mentioned, but soft skills including communication, like sharing ideas. How have you shared ideas with your team? Have you shared ideas with your wider technology team? Maybe you're interested in public speaking. Are you being proactive? How have you been working on your own personal development goals? Are you coming out to events like this one and making your own efforts to improve your working environment? How are you at giving and receiving feedback? That's something that I'm going to come on to again later, but it's also really useful for personal development. And then teamwork. Can you work just as well independently as well as part of your team? And can you provide some examples of that? And just having this listed out is a great way, again, for competency interviews and taking those examples to them. So I started off with a Google Doc of just some examples in these different areas, and I moved that over to a Trello board, so it looks a little bit like this right now, but you could use whatever. Bullet journaling, write some notes out. Maybe you can make your own donuts webpage too, if you're a fan of donuts. But for me, this is a combination of my own things that I'm interested in for personal development reasons and things that the career ladder at FutureLearn wants to see examples in. But the most important thing here is keeping track of your personal development. Because I was able to print this out, take it to a meeting, and use it as a way to say that I deserve a higher salary. So that's a lot about juniors. I also want to touch on what we can be doing as supporters to help juniors to progress in their careers. Starting with just investing time. I know so many junior developers who have been hired and they've had the experience where they've just been expected to get on with things from day one without any support, or the atmosphere is just too busy to give them much support. And it's a really difficult situation to navigate, especially as a new person with little experience. And I think a good first step is to make your colleagues aware of this. Like, consciously set aside time to discuss a plan for your personal development within the company, because it is a really worthwhile development, and that's your sell. Supporters investing time in you speeds up your development tenfold. So ideally, you want to be able to have a mentor. And as a junior, you don't have to have one designated mentor. I've had a lot of different unofficial mentors that have supported me in my career. But having someone to direct all of your even really small questions to is so useful. And having a mentor that can help you learn how to get up and running, answer all of your questions, and just share things like best practices and tips with is also really useful in your careers. And if you can get that information out of their heads by asking them lots of questions, that's great too. If you are a mentor, make sure people feel comfortable asking you those questions, and try and find that balance between supporting someone and also giving them that independence to figure things out by themselves. Just be there to help them out. I'm sure a lot of developers in the room will probably do a lot of pairing. I always want to make sure that people do good pairing. Don't let the junior developer that you work with be a passenger. I've had an experience in the past where I was pairing with a more senior developer on my graduate scheme. It was probably the second week of being a developer officially, and we were working on something so complicated that I lost track of what we were doing, to the point where I actually fell asleep for like a second. It wasn't that bad, please. Okay. But clearly that whole pairing situation was just not interactive. It could have been a lot more interesting and a much better opportunity for me to learn if the person had given me the keyboard and the mouse and let me go at a pace that was much better for me. Because most people learn by doing. So just letting the junior developer drive gives you a better understanding of how they're doing and what they're picking up. And also ask open questions. Sometimes it can be easy to explain a concept and then ask, oh, does that make sense? And at the time it probably does, but then it's easy to forget. But if you ask something more open, like if I move this line of code over to this other file, what do you think is going to happen? If I run the test suite now, do you think the tests are going to pass? Why? Gives you a much better understanding of how that junior is doing, if they're picking up what you're trying to teach them, and if not, you can go over those concepts again and explain them in more detail. It has two-way benefits. The junior developer is learning, and while you're developing your teaching skills too. I think the most important thing for supporters of juniors is to be able to create opportunities for you, for giving you a chance to develop things that you class as your weaker areas. One of the things that I found really useful as a graduate was something called living objectives. So it looked a little bit like this. Around the edge are all the skills that are relevant to my goals. So I was really interested in developing my JavaScript knowledge, CSS and ES6. I also wanted to get into speaking and presenting. And the bigger shape, in the orange shape, was my goals in all of those areas. And then the smaller shape in the middle was my confidence level at the time, when I first did this about 2 years ago. And what was good about this is just having a single place to look where we could focus my personal development. So I'd have regular one-to-ones with my line manager every 2 weeks, and we'd pick something here to focus on for those 2 weeks. So if I chose JavaScript, my line manager might create an opportunity for me to give a talk about a JavaScript thing that I just learned in the next engineering catch-up. Or he might choose someone who knows a lot about JavaScript to come and pair with me on a new feature. But it's a great way to decide what kind of opportunities that you can be working on and you can be developing. And what you'll find is that every time you come back to this graph, you start developing your confidence in lots of different areas, and it's just growing and growing. And you can see how you're developing over time. The final thing that I want to talk about is regular feedback. This is something I personally wanted the most, and something that I found really useful. This can be anything from a quick, I really like the approach that you took in that pull request, to a full report on all the things that the junior developer that you're working with can be improving on. Another one of the grads that I worked with said they didn't feel like they were mid-level at all. They wanted that confirmation from the people around them to make sure that they were going at a good place. But just having that feedback makes a big difference in your career. Giving feedback is really hard, so I always find it useful to give specific and actionable feedback. Thinking about a moment in time, referencing that moment in time, and thinking about what you want them to do with the feedback afterwards. So an example might be in the sprint review that we just had, I wasn't completely sure on what you were trying to get across. Could you maybe think about structuring it in this way instead? And I came across this graph in a retrospective once, and I found it's really useful for giving feedback too. So what kind of things do you think that person should be doing more or less of? Do you think they should stop or start doing something specific, or do you want them to just keep doing something because they're doing really well? It's usually a good starting point for coming up with ideas for feedback. But to wrap up, if you're a junior developer, start thinking about the different areas that you want to stretch yourself in and grow your career goals. Think about ways that you can share your opinions in the different scenarios that you're in at work, and make sure to celebrate your achievements. That's really important. And if you're a supporter of a junior developer, invest time in helping them develop. Create opportunities for them to focus on the things that they consider their weaker areas, and just keep giving them regular feedback so they know where they're at. One final quote from another graduate developer that I used to work with. They said, "Yeah, I don't think you wake up one day and realize you're not a junior developer anymore." It's true. You don't do that. For me, I became a mid-level developer when I had enough examples against the mid-level role in our career framework, and it could be slightly different for each of you too. But absolutely don't worry about where you're at right now. I can guarantee you're doing great, like you've got this. Thank you for listening.